The morning alarm echoed through the metal corridors of New Busan. Colony Asli Giwu pressed her tired face against the thick glass window. Her breath made small clouds on the cold surface as she stared out at the alien landscape that had been her home for 15 years. But today, like every day for the past 3 months, she could see the dark shapes of enemy ships sitting on the horizon like hungry vultures. Giwu was the colony administrator, which meant she was responsible for keeping 30,000 people alive. It was a job that used to involve scheduling supply runs and settling disputes between miners. Now it meant counting how many days of food they had left and watching their defensive shields grow weaker each day. Administrator Lee called Park Minho from across the control room. His voice was quiet and tired. Park had been trying to contact other worlds for help since the siege began. Every day he sent out messages. Every day he got the same answers. The Altarians sent another message. They say helping us would be too expensive for their economy. Giwu closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. The Altarians had been humanity's trading partners for 20 years. They bought human-made tools and sold them rare metals. But when the Vorthok Empire came to destroy the colony, the Altarians suddenly cared more about money than friendship. "What about the Zenthari?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be disappointing. "They say their ancient laws prevent them from interfering in conflicts between other species," Park replied. "Same message as yesterday. Zenthari were supposed to be the wise ones of the galaxy. They had lived among the stars for thousands of years and claimed to value honor and justice above all else. But their honor apparently did not extend to helping humans who were about to be wiped out." Kim Soo-yang looked up from her station near the communication array. She was only 19 years old and had been born on this world. She had never seen Earth, never walked under a blue sky, or felt rain that did not come from the colony's weather machines. To her, this place was not a colony but home, and home was dying. "Automatic distress signals are still broadcasting," she said softly. "But Earth, ... there is still nothing from Earth." This was the worst part. Earth had been silent for over a year. No messages, no supply ships, no sign that humanity's homeworld even existed anymore. Most people in the colony believed that Earth had fallen to some terrible disaster, maybe an alien invasion, maybe a plague, maybe a war that tore the planet apart. Whatever had happened, it seemed that Earth could not help them even if it wanted to. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho entered the control room, carrying a datapad filled with bad news. He was the colony's chief scientist and had been studying the Vorthok forces since they arrived. His findings were not encouraging. "I have analyzed their mining equipment," he said, his voice heavy with worry. "They're not planning to just conquer us. They want to strip mine the entire planet for quantum crystals, and they plan to use any survivors as slave labor." Giwu felt her heart sink even further. The Vorthok Empire was known for being cruel, but she had hoped they might at least keep the colonists alive as workers. Now it seemed that even that small hope was gone. "How long do we have?" she asked. "At their current rate of advance, they will breach our final defenses within 2 days," Dr. Yoon replied. After that, ... He did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what would happen. Choi Hoon-soo, the colony's security chief, was distributing the last of their weapons to civilian volunteers. These were not soldiers, but miners, engineers, teachers, and shopkeepers who had never fired a weapon in anger. They were good people who had come to this world to build a better life for their families. Now they were preparing to die defending it. "We have enough ammunition for maybe one more day of fighting," Hoon-soo reported. "After that, we will have to use mining tools and whatever else we can find." In the residential section of the colony, children played with toys made from scrap metal and recycled materials. They laughed and ran through the corridors, not fully understanding that their world was ending. Their parents watched them with sad smiles, trying to be brave for their sake. Han Minji, the colony's main teacher, gathered the children around her and told them stories of Earth. She described blue oceans and green forests, cities that sparkled with light, and skies filled with birds instead of enemy ships. The children listened with wide eyes, imagining a world they would never see. Will we ever go to Earth? Asked one little girl. Maybe someday, Han Minji replied, though she knew it was a lie. Earth was silent. The galaxy had abandoned them. Death was coming with the sunrise. Outside the colony dome, the Vorthok siege. Engines moved closer. Their lights blinked like evil eyes in the darkness, and their machines hummed with the promise of destruction. Soon they would break through the shields, and 30,000 human lives would be snuffed out like candles in a storm. The automated distress beacons continued their lonely broadcast into the empty void of space, calling for help that would never come. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho could not sleep. He sat in his laboratory at 3 in the morning, staring at data that made his stomach turn. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. What he had discovered about the Vorthok plans was worse than anyone had imagined. The enemy was not just planning to kill them, they were planning to erase them completely. Computer display mining projection 7, he said quietly. The holographic display showed the colony and the surrounding area. Red lines marked where the Vorthok intended to dig. The lines went everywhere, through the residential areas, through the schools, through the cemetery where they had buried colonists who had died of natural causes over the years. Nothing would be left, not even graves. Yoon heard footsteps in the corridor and quickly saved his work. A moment later, Park Min-ho appeared in the doorway. The communications officer looked like he had not slept in days. His hair was messy, and his eyes were red from staring at screens. Any word from the Hegemony Council? Yoon asked, though he already knew the answer. They finally replied, Park said, holding up a message pad. They say the conflict is outside their jurisdiction. They wish us luck and hope we understand their position. Yoon wanted to laugh, but no sound came out. The Hegemony of Worlds was supposed to be the galaxy's peacekeeping organization. Earth had helped create it 30 years ago, writing many of the laws that governed how civilized species should treat each other. Now those same laws were being used as an excuse to let humans die. What about the others? Yoon asked. The Keth Republic? The Spiral Alliance? The Keth say they are too far away to help in time, Park replied. The Spiral Alliance claims they are already committed to other conflicts. Everyone has an excuse. In the residential section, families were packing their most precious belongings into small bags. It's not because they were planning to leave, but because they wanted to keep their treasures close when the end came. Children asked their parents why they were sad, and parents struggled to find words that would not terrify their little ones. Lee Ji-woo walked through the corridors, stopping to talk with families and check on preparations. She tried to look confident and strong, but inside she felt like she was breaking apart. These people trusted her to keep them safe, and she was failing them. She found Choi Hoon-soo in the armory, cleaning weapons that had not been designed for war. Most of their equipment was for mining or construction. Had a few actual weapons, but not nearly enough for 30,000 people. How many can we arm? She asked. Maybe 3,000 with real weapons, Hoon-soo replied. The rest will have to use mining lasers, cutting tools, whatever we can find. But Administrator, these people are not soldiers. They are families. I know, Ji-woo said softly. But what choice do we have? In the colony's main plaza, a group of teenagers had gathered around Kim Soo-young's communication station. They were listening to the automated distress signal that had been broadcasting. For months, it's the same message over and over, calling for help that never came. This is New Busan Colony requesting immediate assistance, the recording played. We are under siege by hostile forces. 30,000 civilians need evacuation or military support. Please respond. One of the teenagers, a boy named Oh Jinwoo, looked up at the dome above them. Through the transparent metal, he could see the alien stars that had been the only sky he had ever known. Do you think Earth is really gone? He asked. Soo-young did not answer right away. She had been born on Earth, but came to the colony when she was just 5 years old. She had fuzzy memories of blue skies and green grass, but they seemed like dreams now. I don't know, she said finally. But even if Earth is still there, it's been silent for over a year. Something terrible must have happened. The outer settlements had already fallen. Lucky ones had been killed quickly. The unlucky ones had been taken prisoner and put to work in the Vorthok mining camps. Reports from the few survivors who had escaped painted a picture of horror that no one wanted to think about. Han, Minji, gathered the colony's children in the school cafeteria for what everyone knew would be their last normal day. She had planned fun activities and games, trying to give the children a few hours of happiness before the darkness came. Ms. Han asked a little girl named Seo Jiang, "Why don't the other planets want to help us?" Han Mingi knelt down to the child's level. How could she explain that the galaxy was full of cowards and selfish creatures? How could she tell a 6-year-old that sometimes good people died simply because no one cared enough to save them? Sometimes. Grown-ups make decisions that are hard to understand, she said gently. But that doesn't mean we stop being good people ourselves. As night fell over New Busan colony, the Vorthok siege engines moved closer. Their lights could be seen clearly. Now, no longer just dots on the horizon, but real machines of war approaching their final target. The sound of their engines carried across the empty landscape like the growl of hungry beasts. The automated distress beacons continued their broadcast, sending humanity's last words into the silent void of space where no one was listening. Attack began before sunrise. Li Juwu was awakened by the sound of explosions that shook the colony dome so hard that dust fell from the ceiling. She rolled out of bed and ran to the command center, where red warning lights were flashing everywhere. "They're breaking through the outer shields," Choi Hyun-soo reported, his voice tight with fear. "The main defensive line is falling back too." The inner perimeter. Through the windows, Jiwoo could see bright flashes of weapons fire lighting up the dark sky. The Vorthok had finally decided to finish what they started 3 months ago. Their war machines rolled across the landscape like metal monsters, crushing everything in their path. Kim Soo-yang sat at her communication station, tears streaming down her face as she watched the defensive positions fall one by one. "Section 7 is gone," she reported. "Section 4 is requesting immediate backup, but we don't have anyone to send." Dr. Yoon Dae-ho burst into the command center carrying his research data. "The quantum crystal deposits are directly under the main colony," he said breathlessly. "They're not just attacking us, they're positioning their mining equipment. They plan to dig right through the dome." Park Min-ho was still at his post, sending out final distress calls even though everyone knew it was hopeless. "This is New Busan colony," he spoke into his microphone. 30,000 civilians need immediate evacuation. This may be our last transmission. The colony's defenders were falling back to the last line of defense. These were not professional soldiers, but ordinary people who had never expected to die in a war. Miners held mining lasers like weapons. Engineers carried cutting tools. Teachers and shopkeepers stood beside them, all preparing to die protecting their families. "Main generator is failing," called out an engineer from across the room. Got maybe 10 minutes of power left for the inner shields." Crew closed her eyes. 10 minutes. After 15 years of building this colony, after all the dreams of making a new life among the stars, they had 10 minutes left before the end. Children had been moved to the deepest part of the colony for safety. Han Mingi stayed with them, reading stories and singing songs to keep them calm. But even the youngest children could hear the explosions getting closer and feel the dome shaking with each impact. "Miss Han," whispered little Seo Jiangar, "the bad people going to hurt us?" Before Han Minji could answer, a new sound cut through the noise of battle. It was different from the Vorthok weapons or the colony's defensive guns. It was a deep, powerful roar that seemed to come from the sky itself. Everyone in the command center froze. Kim Soo-yang looked up from her station with wide eyes. "What was that?" The sound came again, louder this time. It was like thunder, but thunder that had been shaped into something purposeful and angry. Through the dome's windows, they could see shapes moving across the star-filled sky. Fast shapes with lights that cut through the darkness like knives. "Are those ships?" One Minho asked, his voice barely a whisper. The shapes were definitely ships, but not like anything the colonists had ever seen. They were sleek and deadly, moving with a grace that spoke of advanced technology and deadly purpose. As they came closer, lights on their hulls became visible, and those lights showed symbols that made Jiwoo's heart skip a beat. "The Terran Defense Force," she breathed. "Those are human ships." The lead ship was larger than the others, its hull painted in dark colors that seemed to absorb light. As it descended through the smoke and fire of the battle, everyone could see the markings clearly now. The eagle with spread wings, the letters spelling out TDF Retribution. Kim Soo-young's hands flew over her communication controls. "I'm receiving." "A transmission," she said, her voice shaking with excitement and disbelief. "It's on all frequencies." The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional, with a slight accent that sounded like it came from Earth's eastern regions. "New Busan Colony, this is Captain Kong Han-yul of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We received your transmission. Hold fast, cavalry's here." The words hit the command center like a physical blow. Several people started crying. Others just stared at the speakers in shock. After months of being abandoned by the galaxy, after a year of silence from Earth, help had finally come. Outside, the Vorthok forces were learning what human military technology could do when it was no longer hiding. The sleek ships moved like hunting birds, their weapons turning enemy vehicles into burning wreckage with surgical precision. Vorthok commanders, who had spent months slowly crushing a mining colony, suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. The children in the deepest part of the colony could hear the change in the battle's sound. The random explosions and chaos were replaced by the methodical rhythm of a professional military operation. Han Mingi looked up at the ceiling with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Help has come." The Vorthok had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that because the galaxy abandoned the humans had no one left to call for help. They had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has been quietly watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. Earth's children were no longer alone. What happened next was not like the movies or the stories that children heard about space battles. There were no dramatic dogfights or long exchanges of weapon fire. The human ships moved through the Vorthok forces like a sharp knife cutting through soft butter. Lee Ju-woo watched from the command center as the Terran Defense Force demonstrated what 3 months of siege had failed to teach the Vorthok Empire. The enemy was not fighting desperate colonists anymore. They were fighting Earth. The first Vorthok warship to die was their command vessel. Captain Kong Han-yul's voice came over the radio, calm and professional, like she was ordering coffee instead of destroying a ship that carried 3,000 enemy soldiers. "Vorthok command ship, this is Captain Kong Han-yul. You have 30 seconds to withdraw all forces from this system, or we will consider you hostile targets." The Vorthok commander's response was to fire every weapon his ship had at the TDF Retribution. The human ship's shields absorbed the attack like it was nothing more. Then heavy rain. Then the Retribution fired back. Kim Soo-yang had never seen anything like it. The human ship's main weapon was not a laser or a missile. It was something that made space itself seem to bend and twist. The Vorthok command ship simply came apart, its hull peeling away like the skin of an orange. "Target destroyed," Captain Kong reported. Moving to secondary targets, the other human ships spread out across the battlefield with movements that looked almost like dancing. They were not just fast, they were smart. Each ship seemed to know exactly where the others were and what they were doing. When one ship attacked from the left, another would attack from the right at the exact same moment. Enemy fire. Another would appear behind the enemy and destroy them before they could react. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho stared at his instruments in amazement. "Their technology is at least 50 years ahead of anything I've seen," he said. "These ships are not just better than Vorthok vessels. They're better than anything in the galaxy." The Vorthok ground forces were having an even worse time. Their heavy tanks and siege machines had been designed to destroy civilian buildings and frighten unarmed people. They were not ready to fight soldiers who had been trained for real war. Human troops came down from the ships in small vehicles that moved faster than anything the Vorthok had ever seen. These were not the desperate colonists who had been hiding behind shields for 3 months. These were professional soldiers who treated fighting like a science that they had spent decades learning to perfect. Choi Hoon-soo, who had been preparing to die with a mining laser in his hands, watched through the security cameras as human soldiers moved through the Vorthok positions. They did not charge forward like heroes in movies. They moved carefully and methodically, using tactics that turned the enemy's own weapons against them. "They're not just winning," he said in amazement. "They're teaching a lesson." The lesson was simple, but brutal. The Vorthok Empire had built their reputation by attacking worlds that could not fight back. Farm planets, mining colonies, trading posts filled with civilians. They had never faced an enemy that was actually prepared for war. One by one, the Vorthok siege engines that had terrorized the colony for 3 months were turned into smoking wreckage. The enemy soldiers who had seemed so frightening when they were attacking unarmed families now ran in panic. When faced with soldiers who knew what they were doing, Captain Kong's ship landed in the colony's main plaza as the last of the Vorthok forces were being destroyed. The plaza was damaged from months of bombardment, but it was still the heart of the colony where people gathered for celebrations and important announcements. The captain who stepped out of the ship was not what anyone had expected. She was a woman in her 40s, with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She wore a uniform that was clean and professional, but her boots were worn from years of walking on hostile planets. "I'm Captain Kong Haniel," she said. "Simply, sorry we're late." Park Min-ho, who had been sending distress calls into empty space for months, could barely speak. We thought, we thought Earth was gone. We thought everyone had forgotten us." Captain Kong's expression softened slightly. "Earth never forgot. We just went quiet for a while. Needed time to prepare." Dr. Yoon stepped forward. "Prepare for what? For this?" Captain Kong said, gesturing toward the wreckage of the Vorthok fleet. "The galaxy has a lot of species like the Vorthok, bullies who pick on the weak. We needed to be ready for the day when our people would need protection." Lee Gi-woo felt tears running down her face. "But why didn't you answer our calls? Did you let us suffer for so long?" Captain Kong's face became hard as stone. "Because we needed to see who our real friends were when the shooting started. We needed to know which species would stand with humanity when we were in trouble, and which ones would abandon us to die." She looked around at the damaged colony, at the people who had been preparing to die just hours earlier. "Now we know. The Altarians care more about money than friendship. The Xanthari care more about their ancient laws than justice. The hegemony cares more about politics than the lives of innocent people." "And the Vorthok?" asked Kim Soo-young. Captain Kong smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "The Vorthok just learned why predators should not mistake patience for weakness." The morning after the battle, New Busan Colony looked like a completely different place. The Vorthok siege engines that had terrorized the colonists for 3 months were now just pieces of twisted metal scattered across the landscape. Human soldiers moved through the wreckage, making sure no enemies were left alive to threaten the colony again. Lee Gi-woo stood in the main plaza watching more ships arrive from space. These were not warships like the ones that had saved them. These were supply ships, medical vessels, and construction ships. The Terran Defense Force had not just come to fight, they had come to stay. Administrator Lee called Captain Kong Hanyul. As she approached, the captain looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had finished a difficult job. "We need to talk about what happens next." They walked to the edge of the plaza where they could see the work crews setting up defensive positions around the colony. Human engineers were already studying the damaged buildings and making plans for repairs. It was clear that Earth had not sent just a rescue mission. It sent the beginning of a permanent presence. "The other human colonies," Gi-woo said. "Are they safe?" "They are now," Captain Kong replied. "We have fleets moving to protect every human settlement in this part of the galaxy. Some places we arrived just in time, other places." She shook her head. "We were too late, but that won't happen again." Kim Soo-yang joined them, carrying a communication pad filled with messages from across the galaxy. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from dozens of worlds. Everyone wants to know what happened here." Captain Kong took the pad and scrolled through the messages. Her expression grew colder as she read. "The Altarians are asking if we need any help rebuilding. The Xanthari want to send a peace delegation. The Hegemony Council is requesting a formal meeting to discuss our sudden appearance in their territory." "Are you going to meet with them?" Gi-woo asked. "Oh yes," Captain Kong said. "We're going to have some very interesting conversations." Dr. Yoon Daeho hurried over to them, his face excited and amazed. Captain, I've been studying your ship's technology. It's the power sources, the weapons systems, the communication arrays. This is decades ahead of anything the galaxy has seen. How did Earth develop all this without anyone knowing? Captain Kong smiled grimly. We've been very busy while everyone thought we were weak and helpless. Hidden shipyards, secret research stations, training facilities, and systems no one else knows about. While the galaxy grew comfortable and lazy, we were preparing for war. Park Min-ho approached the group, looking confused and hurt. But why keep it secret? Why let people think humanity was defenseless? Because Captain Kong said we needed to know who our real friends were.
Oh, when you're strong.
Everyone wants to be your friend. When you're weak, you find out who really cares about you. She pointed toward the wreckage of the Vorthok fleet. The Vorthok attacked you because they thought you were alone and helpless. The Altarians refused to help because they thought there would be no consequences. The Zenthari hid behind their laws because they thought no one would call them cowards. The hegemony ignored you because they thought humanity was too weak to matter. Young Oh Jinwoo, one of the teenagers who had been listening to the distress signals, stepped forward. So what happens now? Are we going to fight everyone? Captain Kang looked at the boy with something that might have been kindness. No, son. We're not going to fight everyone. We're just going to make sure everyone understands the new rules. What new rules? Asked Kim Soo-yang. Rule number 1, Captain Kong said, holding up one finger. No one attacks human colonies anymore. Ever. Rule number 2, the species that helped us when we needed it will find themselves with very powerful friends. And rule number 3, the species that abandoned us will learn what it means to be alone. More. Ships were arriving in the sky above the colony.
Oh.
These were not just military vessels, but entire fleets.
Oh.
Transport ships carrying families, construction ships carrying building materials, research ships carrying scientists and engineers. Earth was not just protecting its children. It was expanding. Han Mingi brought the colony's children to the plaza to see the ships. The little ones who had been hiding in fear just days ago now looked up at the sky with wonder and excitement. They had never seen so many ships at once, and they had never seen ships that belonged to their own species. Miss Han asked Little. Co Jiang, are we safe now? Yes, sweetheart, Han Mingi replied. We're safe now. Captain Kang activated her communication system and broadcast a message on all frequencies. Her voice would be heard on every world in the galaxy, from the richest trading planets to the smallest farming colonies. This is Captain Kong Hynyol of the Terran Defense Force speaking for Earth and all human colonies. For too long, our people have been scattered and vulnerable. For too long, we have been seen as weak and helpless. The time is over. She paused, looking around at the colonists who had been abandoned by the galaxy, but were now under Earth's protection. Humanity remembers its friends. Humanity remembers its enemies. The galaxy chose sides when they decided whether to help or abandon our people. They will live with the consequences of those choices. Above New Busan Colony, the ships of Earth's fleet filled the sky like new stars. Bright and permanent and impossible to ignore,